a tune, by the way, Mitch, so nothing for 5 minutes, mate. Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 128. As always, I'm going to start us off with a tune.
In patience to abide, to veil the threats of terror, and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden.
Oh no, what happened?
It says he's muted for me. So it says he's still on.
Yeah. That infamous Australian internet.
Yeah. Same old, isn't it?
Oh.
Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take out the white man's burden and reap his soul's reward.
Is this not showing up, guys?
Yeah, it is. But you lagged out for a minute there, I think.
The cry of false human are slowly towards the night. Why brought she us from bondage, a loved Egyptian guys? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly prophet laurel, the easy young grudge praise. Come thou to search our manhood through all of thankless years, no age with dear bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all of thankless years.
Okay, sorry about my Australian internet, people. but that was the excellent Chris Gard with The White Man's Burden, which I really like. Do go and check out Chris Gard's excellent trad music channel. He's one of the few musicians these days who is not at all gay. So there you go. Welcome to my guests this evening, Adam and Mitch. I think we're going to get joined by AI in due course, but we will see. Adam, long time no speak. How you been going, mate?
Yeah, very good. Good to see you all again.
Well, you've been much missed on the channel, and I've had several people ask me where you've been, and I know you've been working hard, and you've also had some family stuff to deal with, so I think that's the answer to that question.
Yeah, just about.
And Mitch, how you going, mate?
Same old, same old.
As always. Could you just explain to people in the chat, I know what it is, but explain to people in the chat your avatar, please.
Oh, it's Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus. Europe's last dictator who wants...
He's made the peace deal with the leader of Wagner, yeah?
Yeah. The Russians saved his skin back in 2020 when the CIA and MI6 tried to gay up him, and now he saved Putin's skin as a means of repaying him. So,
fair enough. Yeah, we'll come on to that in a minute. I'm not quite sure how to do this. I don't know because we've got two main subjects for this evening, apart from anything else guests want to bring up. Obviously, we're going to talk about the situation in Russia. Which seems to have been resolved in the last couple of hours, really, which is good news for the Russian people. And also, I want to talk about some of the utter bullshit which is being spouted around in the UK at the moment about Windrush and West Indian immigration into UK. So there are our two main subjects for this evening. But obviously, guests can bring up anything else they would like to as well. And I've also got something to plug about Australia, but I'll do that towards the end of the stream. I guess because you've not been on for ages, Adam, and let's get you to start us off. And I presume you would like to talk about the Windrush stuff, amongst other things.
Yeah, I haven't got a dedicated subject outside of that. So, yeah, did you want to jump straight into that?
Yeah, let's do that first. I mean, this is a British and Old Commonwealth Anglo-Celtic channel. So yes, let's do that first.
Yeah, so I mean, to start with a brief, the long and short of it, just in case anyone doesn't know, is that it's the 75th anniversary of the Empire Windrush, the SS Empire Windrush landing with those West Indians. I believe it was Tilbury Docks back in 1948, and they're making quite a big song and dance of it. They've had various celebrations. The Mayor of London came out and gave a speech which has had quite a lot of pushback, even from sort of more, you could say, mainstream figures, on the fact that it's basically like, it's not whitewashing, it's blackwashing history, like blackwashing the history of London. And yeah, it's been a bit over the top. They're bringing out a coin to commemorate it. The royal family has actually been really quite big on it as well, promoting this stuff. And of course it's ridiculous. It's all based on a myth. They're really pushing the myth aspect of it hard, which is that these people were invited over. There was a scheme. There was actually an independent article I saw where they were celebrating the fact that trolls got taken off of Twitter for besmirching the glory that is the Windrush generation. And even in that article, they double down on it and say they constantly bang on about misinformation and lies and conspiracy theories. And then they just double down and go, oh, these people came in under a government scheme, which, no such scheme existed. I actually heard, although I haven't been able to double check this, apparently, like they always talk about how they came over and they were nurses. There was a guy called Richie something who was on Twitter, who's a BBC radio presenter. And he referred to people as racist rats for like also besmirching the glory and the honor of the Windrush generation. and he said,
Didn't you,
oh,
Adaman? Didn't you put a tweet on Twitter that pointed out that the Minister of Labour or somebody said, "I had no idea who invited these people."
Yeah, funny enough, there's a really good article by IM 1776 called is it called Windrush Built Britain or something like that? And they kind of go through these claims and they kind of dismiss a lot of them. And they even mention in there that Clement Attlee famously considered diverting the ship to West Africa when he heard the news from the governor of Jamaica. Of course, the mistake was he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was considered, a preposterous thing to be happening at the time. And you can get newspaper clippings like the ones I got, but there are others of various politicians and MPs and all sorts coming out and wondering how this was happening and who was responsible.
Yeah, there was no official invitation as far as I'm aware, and that was even under the Attlee socialist government. There was no official invitation. Patriotic Archive in the chat says they would turn America away from America first. I don't know if that's correct at all, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not sure enough about it. Maybe, but I mean, this was done under the purview of a New Zealand shipping company, which obviously was managing on behalf of the government.
And wanted to fill their ship up.
Yeah, and they sold what was essentially very, very cheap fares. It was, I think it was £28, which was about half the usual price.
Yeah, not an enormous amount of money, even in 1948. Yeah.
No, and I will point out the company run by Jews. They did have some tertiary connection through ownership to the newspaper in Jamaica that advertised the tickets, which is something I've never fully explored. But it wasn't just the case that they just hired advertising space. There was more of a connection there than I think people realize.
I mean, one of the things I'd like to ask, Alan, and I don't know if you or Mitch will have an answer to this, is why did Britain have a great shortage of labour in 1948? Because I can't work out why. It wasn't like Britain had lost as many men as we did in World War One, when there was no shortage of labour in 1919 or 1920. So why was there a shortage of labour in 1948? Britain lost nowhere near as many men in World War II.
Well, this is actually another interesting thing is I don't know what the exact date was, but I don't know if it was the same year or if it was like a year later, but the civil service actually sent this from the Colonial Office, actually dispatched people to the Caribbean to basically dissuade more people from coming, because there was an employment shortage. Because, of course, I mean, I'm not sure of the specifics, you probably know more, but by the time 1948 came around, we were just starting to see the first of large-scale demobilization of troops in Europe.
Well, we actually saw big demobilizations in 1946. So the British Armed Forces in 1948, although they were, I don't know, 3 times the size they are now, were relatively small compared with World War II.
Yeah, and it's like those troops were coming home to find their old jobs filled by women, and some of the industrial sector just destroyed, like still laying in ruin from the war and just starting to get underway, the reconstruction of it.
Yep.
So, and a lot of these people, I mean, even this is something that comes up when Enoch Powell was talking about Drusilla Cotterill, which was, of course, the letter he wrote about the constituent from Wolverhampton. He didn't name her at the time, but it was found out later that was her name. Her family spoke about how the fact that, these people would come to these areas and they wouldn't have any jobs, these West Indian immigrants.
Yep.
And they would sort of like become a bit of a blight on the area. So this was considered a common problem.
There was no labour shortage in Britain in 1948 that I'm aware of anyway.
No. I
mean, all right, yes, there was a lot of jobs in construction and stuff because there were a hell of a lot of bomb sites that needed clearing and then new buildings put up, and people needed new housing to replace the stuff that the Luftwaffe had bombed. That's true, but there were plenty of British dudes who, as you rightly say, Alan, had been released from the British Armed Forces who were able to do those jobs.
Yeah, and of course we already actually had some extra labour. There's a little like a suburb of post-war council houses in Faversham, right, which were actually
Mhm.
built towards the end of the war, and they're called jerry built because it was German POWs that built them.
Yep.
And this wasn't totally uncommon either. People in the farms in the same area, all around Kent, in fact, will have stories about German POWs working on their farms. So,
When I was a kid, Alan, and I was born in '65, so I was a kid in like the early 1970s. There were still places in London where you had prefabs, which were prefabricated houses that were put up to replace stuff that was bombed in World War II.
yeah.
And actually, they were quite nice. I went in a couple of them when I was a kid. They weren't terrible at all. But they were supposed to be relatively temporary housing, like 10, 12 years. But actually, they were still there in the 1970s. But they were a damn sight better than the high-rise flats that were put up after them.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's actually still a town of little post-war prefabs in Essex. It's a pretty run-down town, but I'm not. But they might have been put up later. But I thought they were pre-war, slightly post-war. Sorry.
They were the prefabs were mostly like bungalows. They were single story.
Yeah.
But they had gardens.
Mm.
And you could perfectly easily put in all the mod cons. I mean, they had indoor bathrooms, indoor toilets, all that kind of stuff. So they were quite pleasant places. I mean, like I said, I went in some when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And even in the 1970s, when they should have been knocked down 15 or 20 years before, they were still fine.
Yeah. And it's like I mean, the other thing as well is that from 1946 we had the £10 POM scheme. And under that we exported 1 million people to Australia at this time where we're supposedly struggling for labour. I think we actually exported up to 2 million Britons to various dominions, which would have included New Zealand and Canada.
Yeah, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and even some to South Africa and Rhodesia. Yeah, absolutely correct.
And it's like even the idea that these people were coming over here and becoming nurses and that. I think that the first black nurse didn't come in until like the early 50s. So I've heard. I haven't had a chance to substantiate this, but because a lot of them did struggle because the standards for nursing back then were very high.
Yes. Yeah, it was a fairly prestigious job back then to become a nurse. So, yeah, absolutely right. Duke Valentino in the chat, what's your opinion on Irish immigration over the years? Was it positive or negative? Well, this absolutely ties into what we're talking about, Armin, because, of course, there was quite a lot of Irish immigration into Britain after World War II, which is another way you're going to get labour, It's,
yeah.
So, again, I mean, look, my own mother was born in Southern Ireland, although her dad was actually a Welshman who fought in the RAF in World War II. But, she came from Southern Ireland and she immigrated to England, which is how she ended up marrying my father. So, yeah, again, where's the labour shortage? Because you're getting people from Ireland as well.
Yeah. And indeed, the Irish immigration thing is a funny one because, they'll have this argument in America, right, where they'll say, when they're excusing the violent crime of like the African American community, the basketball Americans, and they'll say, they have the Irish committed a lot of violent crime when they came to America, and then they integrated, but it wasn't anything to do with integration over there. It was the fact that the violent Irish people realized that the American police weren't going to be pushovers and they left.
Yep.
You can actually, you can look at the data from that period of time and you can see that there's almost as many Irish people leaving some of those years as there are arriving. And it's like, it's not the same here, but like you can look at Liverpool, for example, and it was, when, you got that thing where the Liverpudlians say they're Scouse, not English, but that's quite a recent phenomenon. It was the case for a long time that Liverpool its identity was very much that of an English city, even if it had a lot of Irish immigration in it. And it's as the sort of strength, the cultural strength of like England has waned, and it's not become such a fashionable thing to be considered part of this in group, that now this whole we're actually Irish thing has started to pop up more full force. And of course, the fact that more of them came in after the war has contributed to that as well. But
I would also point out that you've got people on YouTube like Joe Owen, who is a Liverpudlian. But I would also count him as a British nationalist as well.
Yeah.
How are you going there, AI?
Not bad, not bad. I'm afraid I might have to finish about 10, but as some of you may probably already know, it's not so much of a dox at this point. I live not too far away from Glastonbury, so to get here, I had to go through the Glastonbury zombies while Lizzo was like playing in the background. So I've gone through like the 7th stage of the hell at this point. I'm so black-pilled, and I need some copium to inject into me. So Mr. Duke, guys, just inject copium into me, please, or just inject some racism levels into me. I need to get them back up to acceptable levels.
All right. What we'll do, AI, is we'll get you to speak next about whatever particular topic you would like to bring up. But before we do, we're talking at the moment about the nonsense that is being put out about the Windrush generation at the moment, and how there was this mythical shortage of labour in Britain after World War II for reasons that none of us can actually work out. So because Britain didn't lose that many men in World War II, relatively speaking, certainly relative to World War I. And we were just saying, look, there was a lot of immigration from Ireland after World War II. Where was this mythical lack of labour, or lack of workers coming from? I mean, it's almost as bad as today when the government is still saying there's supposedly a lack of people in the UK, even though we have very high unemployment rates. But,
yeah, I mean, I've been having a 2-day, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but I've been having a 24-hour back and throw with a bunch of BLM and shitlib activists on I think it was a tweet that Carl Benjamin was responding to, and my point was that the English, because they're saying, English people, the English are just immigrants, and England is just it's a nation of immigrants. And my argument was the land, England, is referred to as England because it is intrinsically connected to the birth of the English people. The Kingdom of England wasn't even before the Kingdom of England. You had, I think it was Athelstan who created the term King of the English, because he was able to differentiate between the Anglo-Saxon, at that time he was referring to as English at that point, and the Danish kings who governed over parts of modern day England, the Danelaw, but basically Danelaw, East Anglia, places like that. And so he said, I'm a king for the Christians there. I'm a king for the Anglo-Saxon Christian population across the land. And the Danes weren't included in that. And so that's where the term King of England comes. He was the King of the English, which then, of course, became the Kingdom of England. It's the same as Scotland. Even the title today of the King of Scotland, it's not the King of Scotland, it's the King of the Scots, because it's ethnically. And my point was that with a nation, the BLM perspective, it's all a nation is created by politics and everything. That's bullshit. The nation is created between the ethnicity and the blood of the ethnicity. That is what creates a nation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Duke Valentino in the chat says, was there a lot of Irish police in England post-war? Listen, even when I was a kid, like I said, I was born in 1965, most of the Metropolitan Police in London were ex-military, most of them. That was the most common way blokes joined the police, is they left the army or the Air Force or the Navy and they joined the cops. That was where most police came from. They were quite strict. They would whack you up the back of your head if you were doing something naughty, but as a kid I'm talking about. But they wouldn't arrest you. because that was not what happened. They give you a smack on the back of the head, and I think they were enormously better because they were doing what the cops' real job is, which was deterring crime.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. But I mean, yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't really know to what extent there were the Irish in the police in the post-war
There
period.
would have been some, because look,
Yeah.
let's remember that when World War II broke out, a quarter of the Irish Defence Force deserted, went north, and joined the British Army. I mean, partly I'm sure, because family traditions, and partly because they just like to fight. So whatever.
I mean, my dad's uncle, he was in the Royal Irish Constabulary, and then I believe he did like a stint with because he was out. No, he was out with the Black and Tans. Went to the Royal Irish Constabulary, then went to the Royal Ulster Constabulary. So he did like the whole trifecta in that regard.
Fair enough. What's your opinion, Mitch, on this stuff that we're talking about at the moment?
I haven't really got anything to say other than what's already been said, to be fair.
Fair enough, mate. Fair enough. Patriotic Archive, and I have to thank Patriotic Archive for this evening's thumbnail, by the way. He found that, which I think is a very good one. Says, my Irish great-grandmother came over to England in World War II as a volunteer nurse. Which is a perfectly respectable way to arrive in England, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, and it's like, I mean, there's an extent to which there can be a lot of Paddy resentment on the right, which isn't completely misplaced. They can be damn subversive at times, right? The Irish question, it needs answering. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
But at the same token, they are, pretty close to us genetically. They are just across the water. The islands have had quite a long history together, both against and with, more than we have with the continent.
Totally agree. Yeah. That's my feelings.
Yeah, and it's like, as I was saying about Liverpool earlier, if you can build a strong cultural identity against England, or rebuild it, reinvigorated with new spirit, this just wouldn't be an issue at all.
Yeah, the thing is that, like, modern Irish nationalists, I mean in 2023, what they're all about is Brits out, Somalians in, basically. That's all they're about. And the same goes for Scottish nationalists and to a large degree for Welsh nationalists too. And this is just ridiculous, because what it is, we are all people who are fairly DNA closely related. And today we have the same enemies. The people who want to destroy the Irish people in the Republic of Ireland are the same people who want to destroy the English people, the Scottish people, and the Welsh people. They are the same people.
And the laziest thing of all of it is it's the same fucking language as well. Like, it's been quite funny to see these Irish leftists with like hashtag Brits out in their profile on Twitter or something, and they're sitting there banging on about how, like, this Eritrean is like just as Irish as you, Paddy McGonigal or whatever.
64,000 new Irishmen are great, but we can't have this Brit guy because that's evil. It's just so funny.
I think their immigration has increased by something ridiculous, like 350% in the last couple of years as well.
Well, I mean, look, the other thing is, like Scotland, Ireland has a relatively low population. Like, you, in both cases, I mean, I think Ireland's got a population of 6.5 million, maybe, and Scotland's got a population of about 5.5 million, maybe. Do you know how little time it will take to make you a minority in your own country?
Oh yeah, they're speed running what they've been doing in England for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, in England, it's bad enough, but
yeah. What's the name of that guy on GB News? The gay one, the gay presenter.
Oh, the twink. Yeah.
Tom Hardy.
Tom
Tom
Hardy. Yeah,
Hardy.
he's salivating at how many Barrett's homes he could cram into Ireland. And he wants that for the Peak District.
Let me just say one thing about the thumbnail for tonight's stream. Sir Charles Beresford of the Royal Navy, right? He was an Anglo-Irishman. And the UK military, but especially the army, but to a lesser degree the Royal Navy, was full of Anglo-Irishmen like Sir Charles Beresford, who absolutely regarded himself as an Irishman. But I mean, you know.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the voice of anti-Irish Irishness and racism here tonight. So, okay, on the Irish topic, the problem is, a long time now, there's been no aristocracy. That English Anglo-Irish aristocracy that mainly existed in and around Dublin and that sort of region of Ireland, which no longer exists. Especially since the creation of the Irish Republic. And so I think one of the problems with Ireland today is that genetically they are prone to be incredibly low IQ. I'm sorry, but I mean, you have that. You also have you know, that high level of, I mean, there is a high level of incredible group consensus. They're very much similar to the Africans in that it's maybe it's a legacy of tribalism. I don't know, but there's very much everything has to be conceived and done within a group. It can't be done on a. You can't sort of defer to a strong leader.
Look, hang on, AI. I have to slightly object to this. There are some very good modern, real Irish nationalists. And when I say modern, real Irish nationalists, I'm talking about people who don't want Ireland to be taken over by assorted third world people. All right. So there are quite a lot of guys. And like I know for a fact, there are at least 5 or so on our own Discord. So, you know, let's not go too far on that one.
But I do think there is just something inbuilt in the Irish, in the Irish person that makes them this way. I mean, okay, on the individual level, I like Thomas Sowell. He's a very interesting guy. I like that Jesse. What's he called? Jesse Jessup.
This has nothing to do with what I'm talking about.
But my point is that those guys I like, and I'm sure there are plenty of perfect Irish, good Irish nationalist types who are, they are sensible and don't say or behave in a disgusting manner. But at the same time, they don't do
I don't know how much you actually watch our Discord, but if you do, I think you will have seen that there are quite a lot of loyalist Irishmen, including Irishmen born in Southern Ireland in the Republic, on our Discord.
Yeah, but AI is talking about the group variances more specifically, which is kind of the bigger issue, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm not talking about individual. I'm not talking. I note that in Ireland, more so. I think more so. I mean, Scotland, it's hard to tell, but definitely more so than England. There definitely seems to be a larger group of the population who are more easily coerced into believing absolute insane, into do insane political things than the rest of the. I think in England,
I think a lot of people in England are getting coerced into that same thing. But yeah, fair enough. I get.
I don't know. I think back in the day, if I remember back in the day, there like even back as far as like the EDL, and you can have your views on the EDL and whatever, but even back as far, probably even a bit before then, I think there was, definitely stronger levels of pushback. Because you think about Ireland has recently gone I mean, it's recently gone down the shitlib rabbit hole quite recently. I mean, within my lifetime, it has. I mean, I'm thinking back in 1990, it was still homosexuality was still illegal, wasn't it?
Well, it was also a heavily Roman Catholic and anti-abortion country back then, which it completely is not anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's my point. It's quite it's quite it's quite there was there seems to be like one drastic swap. I mean, that's the sort of thing you would happen in several decades. It's happened probably less time than that, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, look, I'm very, very conscious of. I don't want to slag or paint anyone off with the same brush, because I know there are plenty of good Irishmen, and I've enough Irish in myself that, like, I did tours in Northern Ireland with the British Army during the Troubles. And I always thought it was like craziness, what was going on there to some degree. On the other hand, I totally support the idea that Ulster should remain part of the British Isles. And I retain the hope that someday in the future, when like we all lose the current woke insanity, the island would like to join some sort of union with Britain. I retain that faint hope, and I think it could still happen. Because
It would have to be kind of a political
actually,
union, though.
No, not really a political union, but I think because I think that's probably unrealistic, certainly in the short to medium term. But
I don't really want a civil union, though. Ultimately,
no, but some sort of trade union, like trade agreements and so on.
Oh yeah,
which we used to have, which would make huge sense for Southern Ireland, because it's the westernmost part of the British Isles, whatever else it wants to be. It just is the westernmost part of the British Isles. I would like to see us cooperating more. Back in the day when Southern Ireland was part of Great Britain, and there was the Empire and all the rest of it, I think that was a much better time. But that's just me.
I would also say that a good portion of the Unionists in Northern Ireland identify as Ulster Scots, which so a lot. Cause I mean, the ones that I've met who identify as Ulster Scots will vehemently remind that they're not Irish; they are Ulster Scots or from Northern Ireland. They don't really identify that much with some of them. Because I know there are some Irish who are Unionists and in Northern Ireland who aren't Ulster Scot, but I think with Northern Ireland it's easy to forget the people who live there are. I mean, I don't know what the demographic is now, but historically the majority were Protestants and Ulster Scots, not Irish in the sense that some people would tend to sort of believe.
Well, look, all I would say is I know people like Lady Shalott, who's an absolutely loyalist Ulster lady, but she still has family who live in the south of Ireland and the Republic, and like it's not as simple as people think it is.
Mm.
Yeah, Michael, 19th century fan said, "Why would the Republic want to deal? Well, ultimately, because hopefully, when we get to that point, we'll be one of the only kingdoms in town that's still got a strong forward vision and an united spirit, and that'll be incentive enough." But obviously they can also buy Land Rovers from us.
I
Yeah.
do think the myth of 1916 though is it's quite a strong one in Ireland, on the island of Ireland.
Yeah, we can break that with good propaganda.
Yeah, but it was a myth. It was a myth.
It doesn't have to be a myth.
There were vastly
break it with propaganda.
Yeah, no, look, there were vastly more Southern Irishmen fighting on the Western Front for Britain, fighting in the Grand Fleet of the Royal Navy for Britain. There were vastly more, like 100 or 200 times more Irishmen fighting for Britain than fought against Britain in 1916. This is just a fact.
Mm. Yeah. No, 555. I disagree. The new Defender is admittedly more of a mainstream vehicle, but also 10 times better than the old Defender. The old Defender was a utility truck. It was good because you could attach a crane to it one day and then a pickup body the next, and so on and so forth. But it was not actually a good 4x4 at all.
All I can say about Land Rovers is I like the old short wheelbase Land Rover from the 1980s. Haven't liked any of them since, but that's just me.
To be honest, I think they went for a rough time for a while, but the new ones are pretty reliable, although there's other issues to talk about that are general to all modern cars. But yeah, whatever.
We're all going to be banned having cars soon anyway, Admin, as I'm sure you realise.
I mean, the EU seems to be cucking on that stuff, but yeah, we'll have to see.
So long as they have a net zero thing, we're going to be banned from having cars. 15-minute cities. That means you're not going to be able to move outside your town. Try and get a overseas holiday you have to fly to. I reckon that's going to get rationed and then stopped. Eat the bugs. Obviously, that's going to happen. Yeah, I think all of the worst dystopian stuff that everyone on the right has been talking about is just coming down the pipeline, man. It just
do you know what's do you know what's even more depressing for me is that if there is a 15 minutes like policy where I live, that means once a year. I mean, I'm going to be stuck in the 15 minutes, and then once a year, I'm going to have all the international shit libs descend a few fields down from me and have Lizzo like just helicoptering in, singing.
Do you think they'll let them even have Glastonbury?
Oh yeah,
Glastonbury. Oh god. Oh god. Oh yeah. God. Yeah. I mean, I'm literally going to have like I'm gonna have like top notch like gay infiltration through my bedroom window. I mean, it's over. It's just all over.
All right. Josephina says driving is too much fun. It will never be banned. Sorry, darling, don't agree with that at all. But anyway, and despite her picture, I do believe she is a female. So there we go. But anyway, yeah, all right. Alman, your final thoughts on this nonsense about
Windrush.
Yeah.
What did we just we covered how much of a myth it was. We covered demobilization. We covered the Palms.
There was no labor shortage.
Yep, no labor shortage. It's a bit of a mystery where this myth, like where they got the idea that they could actually get away with pushing this myth from. It is reinforced through everything now. Like even BBC Bite Size, which is literally children look at this for schoolwork. They show this in the classroom. That talks about it. It is pushed at every level of society. Even if you go to some museums, they will have bits on like basically echoing this myth. It's some of it was that there was like a really tiny amount of colonial volunteers that were brought into Britain during the war for like very particular things, and this is kind of used to justify it. Like you'll get this thing where these people just bring up like a single picture of like this black whatever from whenever, and they'll go, "Oh, see, Britain's always been diverse." The next one was there was a scheme from 1955 where again, like particular departments like London Transport and stuff like that would bring in would be able to recruit directly from places like Barbados. And another thing as well is when they talk about how another thing they try to do is they say that when these people came here they faced all this hostility, and of course this is wrapped up in a narrative where they go like it was so horrific that these people came here to help us, and they faced all this hostility where they came here. I'll be honest, I know there's probably some truth to some of that. I think a lot of it's bullshit. It's kind of like the to go back to the Irish thing, the what is it, the no dogs, no blacks, no Irish signs that they like to bang on about. There's no evidence that those existed.
That was much more in America than it ever was in Britain.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's in America, but there is one example. If you Google it, it's just, if you Google this sign, there's just 100 images of the same one sign. And if you track down where that sign is, it's in some Irish immigration museum, and even they admit that it may not be true, that they don't know the origin of it. So
but I don't think there was ever anything like that in Britain, to be honest with you. I really don't.
Exactly. And I'll tell you another example. I don't know if anyone remembers the Smethwick, the famous Smethwick election, where the Tories had a pamphlet that said if you want an N-word for a neighbour, vote Labour, or something along those lines. And this pamphlet sadly was not true. It's full of spelling mistakes. It's it mentions about when they get elected, when the Tories were already in power, so it doesn't really make much sense. It doesn't have like election materials have to have campaign materials have to have serial numbers on them to denote what party they're for, and this had none of that.
Adam, could I ask you? I'm sure you must have seen this on Twitter. Some chick called Bobby, Bobbie, posted a video from 1954 saying, "Who are the British people?" And it was narrated in 1954. I retweeted this because it's like British dudes watching the FA Cup final and a Test match cricket, punting down the Thames, and like doing all the stuff that people do in a country. And every single one of them is an Anglo-Celtic white person in 1954. Every single one, with no exceptions.
Well, I mean, this is of course the other thing is that well, right, but this is the thing. Like, this is the other thing people have to remember. Like the Windrush thing was really tiny. Like, it made massive waves.
It was a few hundred people. Absolutely right.
Yeah, but they did displace entire communities. And completely remodel entire towns just because of the outward negative effects that they had. But yeah, so the thing with the Smethwick leaflet is it was a fake. I actually kind of think it was made up by journalists and activist groups at the time so that they could get the Conservatives and every other major party to come out and bang on about anti-racism. They even got Malcolm X to fly all the way out from America just to be photographed with this leaflet standing like at the end of the street or something, which just seems totally. If this was as common as they're making out, that just seems so bizarrely over the top.
I've got 555 in the chat saying you're all too young to remember the show Love Thy Neighbour, I suppose.
I have gone back and watched it.
Yeah, but I actually watched it when it came out, and the fat, ugly, nasty white bloke was the anti-hero, whereas the attractive black couple were the hero and heroine of that show. Even back then, they were working against us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, like when Enoch Powell, gave his famous speech. I think the Times called him evil, like the next day.
Yeah.
You know, and he was kicked out of the shadow cabinet and was vilified by every major establishment. And we're supposed to believe that this was a racist country that gave these people lots of abuse. You know, that's patently
let's
absurd.
remember who ran the Tory party. It was Edward Heath.
Yeah.
And he may or may not, in inverted commas, have been a pedophile.
Yeah. Although I don't think being a
there's
pedophile is necessary to be a paedophile to be black philic, but
oh no, absolutely. But I think Edward Heath probably was, to be honest with you. Like there was a lot of stuff around there, and like I don't always agree with like a lot of smoke means there's some fire, but yeah, I think in his case it probably was true, and particularly because he was absolutely mad shit keen to get Britain into the EU.
Yeah, and it's and it, you know, the problem has always been that we as a people have been too soft, our establishment was too soft to begin with, and now our establishment is just openly against us, and has been for many decades at this point at least.
Yes.
Duke Valentino in the chat says someone was close friends with the Krays. I can guarantee you that was not Edward Heath, but there we go. But yeah, and trust me, I know a bit more about the Krays than you do because I lived on the other side of the river from them when they were still around. But anyway, one of them was completely a nutcase homosexual, and the other one was nowhere near as bad, to be honest. But there we go.
Yeah, my oh god, Duke, where have you gone? It's my stream now. So anyway, the hot new topic, HBD. Hopefully he comes back soon. But yeah, did AI? Did you have any?
Oh,
sorry guys, don't know why I'm there.
I think the other guys are. Oh, there they are.
I'm back.
Sorry guys.
Yeah.
Forgive me, my Australian internet. I was just going to say that, there was a load of corruption involving the Metropolitan Police that the supposed clearing up of the Krays was to do with. But yeah, there we go. I'm not going to go into that further because it's not useful anyway. But yeah, I don't know. No, the stream did not get Wagnered. We're going to talk about that in a minute anyway. But yeah, so Enoch Powell was not friends with the Krays. Where do you get this, Brian Borrow? This is ridiculous. Did he ever meet
I can't imagine that.
No, nor can I.
Can't imagine that crossover. No, I can't imagine that. Well, because he wasn't he wasn't even a London MP, so yeah.
No, exactly.
He wasn't. I mean, if he was a London MP, then I guess it's not beyond the realms of possibility. But no. I mean, I know that the Krays had a lot of judges, like people in the crown and everything.
They had quite a few people who they could blackmail. I don't think Enoch Powell was one of them. And in any case, I said, there was one of the Krays who was a homosexual nutcase, and his brother was nowhere near as bad, to be honest. Nowhere near as bad. But that's just me,
Yeah.
And as an ordinary civilian, they were not going to hurt you anyway.
I mean, I'd rather have the Krays than the modern, gangs in London today. So, but.
Oh yeah, where you got like 15 black guys who are going to stab you to death for like no reason whatsoever. Yeah, kind of. I totally agree with that, to be honest. And Dossastic Draco says there was a scandal with the Krays and Lord Boothby, who was a Labour peer. Could well believe that, mate. Could absolutely well believe that. I'm never very fond of Labour peers. Actually, I'm going to do my subject now before we go on to anything else.
I'm going to have to head off now, but thanks for having me on for the time. Yeah, pretty good, and yes, I'll try and catch up with the rest of this tomorrow. Tomorrow, the rest of the stream. So, have you talked about the Wagner stuff yet, or is that later?
No, not yet. We're going to do that at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, but go well, AI. Thank you for joining us, and take care.
See you later.
No worries.
All right, I'm going to do my subject now before we go on to Wagner. The thing is, I think AI has totally made me lose my train of thought. Yes. All right, we're going to leave this. We'll come back to it.
Was it the voice thing, the Oz stream?
No. I had nothing to do with that at all.
Oh, okay.
Damn it. Oh yeah, I know what it was. Look, I like Academic Agent. Okay, I think he has a good and entertaining channel.
Oh.
I watch most of his shows, but he's making at least 2 really big errors now. First one is, like, he has this obsession with Tony Blair. Tony Blair was a vile, totally evil British traitor. All of the mass immigration coming into the UK now was made possible by Tony Blair and his changes in regulations. The Labour Party even said, we are going to rub the noses of white British Conservatives in diversity. They even said that. He was totally in favour of the European Union. He was totally against Brexit, which, by the way, Academic Agent voted against because he said it might put his house price down. But also, he's an evil man. He killed over 700 British servicemen in Iraq and Afghanistan for absolutely fuck all, nothing. They died for no purpose whatsoever. Every one of those widows and orphans and mothers and fathers should know that Tony Blair killed your son for nothing. And on top of that, there were thousands more British servicemen who were maimed and wounded in that same nonsense in Iraq and Afghanistan for absolutely nothing again. And yet still we get Academic Agent, who, like I say, I like him. I think he's quite entertaining, saying, oh no, at the next election, you should vote Tony Blair. Fuck that shit. At the next election, if you're on the right, vote for any of the right of centre parties, any of them. Like, I detest the so-called Conservatives. I detest them. I hate them. I want them all destroyed. Okay? But if you're on the right, vote for any of the right of centre populist parties rather than for the Labour Party. I don't care if Sir Keir Starmer is somehow under the control. Hang on, let me finish, mate. Is somehow under the control of Tony Blair. Sir Keir Starmer was the head of public prosecutions and the head of the Crown Prosecution Services at the height of the so-called grooming gang scandal, when little white British Anglo-Celtic girls as young as 11 were being repeatedly raped by Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, etc. So Keir Starmer was head of that, and when he left after, what was it, 5 or 8 years, I can't remember now, he was given a knighthood. So don't tell me, Academic Agent, that Sir Keir Starmer is somehow based and we should vote for him, because it's nonsense.
I don't think that's actually what he's saying, though.
What is he saying then?
he's kind of saying more that that this is kind of the Blair strategy, is that he's going to pretend to outflank the Tories from the right. But he's spoken repeatedly about how it's always a lie, that how they cover up their own crime statistics and everything else. I think he kind of plays into the meme a bit at this point because people keep joking about it. But I don't think he's ever actually gone to the point of saying.
I just think it's a lie, and I'm sorry. Like, I think if you're on the right, you got to vote for one of the right. I still think Labour's going to win the next election, but let's at least try and get a couple of MPs.
Oh, you won't get a couple of MPs, but it doesn't really matter.
Well, you might.
It doesn't matter because it's not. I mean, you're not going to get anything by having a couple of MPs anyway. You need to take over the places like the civil service and that. But it doesn't. I mean, maybe he plays into the meme a little bit too much, and it's kind of like overtaken him. Maybe his last little ounce of liberalism is reasserting itself. But I am glad you brought this up though, because it reminded me of something. Actually, and it is true that Tony Blair does outflank the Tories from the right, but of course the left now uses this to claim that Tony Blair was a conservative, so therefore they can kind of wash their hands of him. Because of course he has such a bad track record and everyone knows it. But it's of course it's all crap, because he can say lots of things, but what he actually did when he was in power was always the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And for example, right, so AA's actually brought up Keir Starmer channeling this sort of Blair energy and talking about being conservative. But here's an article from just 2 days ago about how, and this is on Politics Home, about how Labour MP Annalisa Dodds, who's the Shadow Secretary of State for Women and Equalities, is pushing forward on some what is apparently just a Labour Party plan to use the British Business Bank to increase sort of opening or starter entrepreneurial loans to close to minorities, to close the disparities between blacks and whites essentially. And it even kind of hints, although they don't say it, it kind of hints that they may bring in disparities in business taxes, specifically focused on taxing white businesses more, or at least taxing black businesses less. Which is, and of course, this proposal is absolutely ridiculous, because you can actually go and look at the British Business Bank, which, again, another institution, a Blairite-styled institution, but opened by David Cameron.
Who was also a Blairite.
Yes,
but, yeah.
Blair 2.0. And you can look at the stats on who benefits the most per capita from startup loans, and they lend the most to blacks, even though they also have the lowest success rate when it comes to actual entrepreneurial endeavors. And that's taxpayer money that's
surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like, the enormous amounts of British taxpayers' money that are being sent to Ukraine to fight Russia. When the British Armed Forces are absolutely starved for funds. The Royal Navy's never been weaker. The RAF's never been weaker. The British Army's never been weaker in British history, going right back to Charles I. Never been weaker. But look, I just think I like AA. I follow his channel. I quite often super chat on his channel. I speak to people who are mates with him. But I just think he's totally wrong about this Blair thing. I also think he's totally wrong about this putting the woke away. Not going to happen.
Yeah,
not going to happen.
I don't know if you watched his recent cigar stream with Endeavour. Maybe I'm biased because I've always been a fan of Endeavour, but I do think
I like Endeavour. I think Endeavour's a good guy, and he totally disagreed with him as far as I recall.
Yeah. I will just quickly say before we say anything on that, Adam in chat, to be fair, given who rules this, is probably good that it's weak. This is probably my biggest contention with what AA has said about this stuff, is where he said that he just wants someone who's competent. Like, they're all evil. He wants someone that can at least do it properly. I know that friend of the channel, Rupert, also disagrees with this too.
Yeah.
that actually no, you want them to be weak and incompetent. You at least want a laughing stock, something to laugh at as we go down.
Adam, when you say Rupert, do you mean Rupert August?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Rupert's a good bloke. Yeah, I like him very much. I think he's also an intelligent guy like yourself as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's like shit, I forgot what I was going to say before that. So you know, like AA makes some good arguments in that stream where he brings up that we've had this problem before with like the civil rights movement in America, and you know, Reaganism came along and put this away. This is true. This is a good example as well. It's a good counter argument. However, these people are like, admittedly, the civil rights people, the people around that time were even worse than BLM is today by quite a way. However, they weren't as entrenched in the establishment as they were back then.
I would also
they're more entrenched now, sorry, than they were back then, I should say.
Yeah, I would also say, Alan, that Nathan C.J. Hood brought up a good counterpoint to that on Twitter when he pointed out that, Blair really reduced crime in Britain unless you happen to be like a teenage down to 11-year-old girl who was getting multiple rapes from so-called grooming gangs.
Yeah. I mean, I do actually disagree, because he says that, like, oh, you know, like some of the people have been saying, oh, yeah, but Blair did actually like lock up more criminals. I mean, like, here's an example actually of what I'm talking about, what Endeavour was talking about, and also to counter Blair. What was the famous prison riot that happened under Tony Blair? Was it Nottingham?
Yeah, there was one. I
there was a big one. It went on for a couple of
vaguely
weeks.
recall it. Yeah.
Yeah, and David Blunkett, who'd been the blind one, who'd been pivotal in Tony Blair's cabinet in helping Tony Blair construct things like and enlarge things like the Department of Justice and things like that into these sort of Blairite neoliberal blobs that we now know of them as today. They then turned around and tried, you know, David Blunkett specifically, and tried to have these prison riots shut down. He said, if you don't sort it out, I'll essentially send in the army. And he was essentially out-blobbed by the very monster that he'd created.
Yep.
And they turned around and said, and they laughed at him, and they went to the newspapers and they published this, and they made a mockery.
You silly blind bastard! Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And so you know, and I think, to be honest, I think that's a good encapsulation of why they won't be able to put this stuff away. This monster is too big. It's gotten out of their hands now, and it's not. They don't have the balls to be able to put this thing back in its place.
Even if they wanted to, which I am dubious.
Yeah, like, of course, there's an extent to which they can just do what the Tories have always done and just gone, oh, it's out of our hands. These people are insane, but still vote for us, you know, and it just carries on as normal. So, and it's like there's no real opposition to them. Like Richard Tice, he's a lovely bloke and he's got some great ideas, but he's not it.
No.
Nigel Farage is significantly better, but he's still not quite there. You know, we haven't got our Caesar. That's kind of the issue.
I still think that the next general election, and we've all got to vote for the smaller right of centre party in our area that has the most chance of getting an MP. Unless you are like sure, there are maybe, I don't know, 20 places in the UK where there's a real Conservative MP. Maybe. Even them I don't really trust, to be honest, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I would just say to Josephina in the chat, Endeavour Morse, you know, I love the Morse novels, but that was a long time ago. And like, that's late for me in terms of like my English thing, because like, as I said, I was born in 65. But now, that's not what England is anymore. Sadly, I wish it was. But even that was pretty left-wing, to be honest. But, you know, just my own view. All right. Anything to say on that, Mitch?
I mean, when it comes to, like, Farage, I mean, that's the thing is, after him, there's no replacement. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
what
Farage
will
has
do.
got to step forward and say, "Yeah, all right, I'm going to do this." And he is. He
Okay, and what
hasn't
if he
yet.
doesn't? Okay, and what if he
Well,
doesn't?
then I
What if
don't
he
know,
just
mate. Then I don't know.
I'm confident he will, but I'm not sure what that's actually going to achieve anyway.
I don't know. I think if Farage stepped forward at the right time, he could probably rip away up to half a dozen Conservative MPs.
I mean,
And
he's had polling
that
conducted.
might make a difference.
Farage himself has actually had polling conducted almost completely privately to see what percentage of the population would vote for him if he headed a party. And
if
you
he
don't
got-
do that
if
if
he
you're not
got-
actually planning on doing something.
Yeah, and if he got 6 actually Conservative, and there are maybe 25 absolutely decent Conservative MPs still, but if he got half a dozen of those guys, he is going to get some support.
Mm.
I mean, even most Conservative Party members detest Sunak, which is why he was never elected by Conservative Party members. You know, he was parachuted in. They even preferred the dimwit woman who he replaced, which I don't blame them for, because at least she was British, for God's sake. But yeah, anyway.
Well, I mean, of course, you know, just a hint back earlier to the Smethic leaflet thing I was talking about earlier. The implication behind that was they were saying that these black people could win elections in Britain in white communities if only they didn't have racism against them. But of course, you know, there's no racism to speak of in the bloody in the Labour Party pushing back against the Conservatives, and yet they couldn't get Rishi to win amongst the Conservative Party electorate. No matter how hard they tried.
Why does Britain have an Indian banker as its prime minister?
Well, exactly. He's never
Who
won.
who nobody, not even the Conservative Party members, voted for, and in fact, the Conservative Party members rejected him 3 times.
But here's the bigger worry: the Tory Party is willing to lose elections and even possibly get annihilated just to not have a guy in it that isn't completely regime endorsed. Like, Boris is the regime's guy on everything except that one little thing, and because of that, he's out of the club, and he's considered such a threat by them that they will literally destroy their own party to keep him out. You
I
know,
don't know.
just think about.
To some degree, and that says stuff about the Conservative Party,
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
but it also says a lot about the British general public, for God's sake.
Well, not really, because they haven't really had much of a say in this whole thing.
All right, maybe.
I mean, they've repeated like one of the things that we say about like the West Indian thing and Windrush and all the rest of it. Not to go back to that wholesale, but is, you know, people say the phrase "we were never asked," which is a pretty good slogan, but it's not even true. We were asked and we said no repeatedly, and the government just did the opposite. Yeah, in every instance,
were ignored. Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, that's another thing about Blair. You know, and David Blunkett. David Blunkett specifically conspired with the civil service to counter claims by Migration Watch UK and other anti-immigration think tanks. They specifically timed and statistically released their statistics at a time where the news was heavily embedded with other bigger stories, specifically to try and stop these groups from being able to gain ground. You know, the amount of psychological warfare which was weaponized against the British public, and the British public is still overwhelmingly anti-immigration.
Yeah, true. For all the good it does us, but yeah, true.
Yeah.
No, look, I don't agree. I don't disagree, Alan, at all. But to me, Blair is a vile filth. I think he should have spent many years in prison rather than being knighted, but that's just me. And I find I like Academic Agent. He's got a very good show. Watch it all the time. Like quite a lot of people who know him. But his obsession with Blair to me is unhealthy, to be honest.
Yeah, kind of like Dave the Distributiv's obsession with BreadTube. They just can't leave him alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Dave the Distributist, and I'm a mod on his channel. I'm a mod on his channel and also on Apostolic Majesty's channel. The only two that I'm mods on. Yeah, Dave has this thing about lefties.
Yeah.
I
What's
can't
that thing?
watch them. I can't watch them.
What's the thing that the Catholics have? Is it the 10 steps guide to get them off like porn addiction and stuff like that? We'll have to create something like that, but for BreadTube for Dave.
Yeah, I've got no idea what the Catholics said because I'm not a Catholic, although my mother was. But yeah, I love Dave. Dave, the distributist, is an excellent channel. Do go and subscribe to him. But he has this deal that he's addicted to watching these lefty morons, which I just think it's a waste of time.
Yeah, although I do say that if people can, they should look up his speech at last year's US Skildings event. It is very good, but although it is based largely around his obsession with these people, but it's still a very good listen.
Yeah, no, Dave's a good bloke. I mean, he's also a husband and a dad, so he walks the walk, which is always good. But yeah, all right, we've gone on ages. And I think we have to come to Russia because about 3 hours ago or less, every Ukrainian and NATO fanboy on Twitter was going crazy because there was a coup in Russia.
The minivan coup of peace, yeah.
Yeah, everyone was saying, all that money we sent to Ukraine, and you're still going to say this is useless because the Russian government is about to get over for it. What do you say to that, Mitch?
To be fair, the last 24 hours kind of blindsided me because I wasn't expecting this, as well as the fact that it got resolved by the guy in my avatar just diplomatically resolving it. So I was kind of a bit doomerish initially, but then I'm looking at it now and just think, I still don't know what to make of it, because on one hand, you have a deal where, for example, Prigozhin is not going to get prosecuted because he's now buggered off to Belarus, and all the fighters that took part in the little push, as it were, just get immunity. But like the whole thing is, it was completely avoidable because you had Shoigu and Gerasimov and the whole sort of top elite of the Russian army were just dysfunctional. But then it's also, I mean, what? I don't even know what to make of Wagner because I think they gobbed off for months about the MOD screwing them over. They then do a coup, and then just as it hits 5 minutes to midnight, they just do a deal. They split up a Freikorps in 1919 doing a deal with Weimar. So I still don't know fully what to make of this supposed coup. But it's also funny that all these NAFO-tards, who, they seized as Wagner took over Solidar and Bakhmut, all of a sudden to just celebrate said Wagner as freedom fighters against evil Vladov Putler. And then as soon as the deal comes through, they're back to calling Wagner terrorists.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I was just on Twitter, as I'm sure you were last night, and like watching all these like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tweets saying, "Oh, Russia is like falling apart. Russia's dying. All that money we gave to Ukraine, all those weapons we gave to Ukraine, all good because Putler is defeated." And then all of a sudden you get this message come through, and it was supported by many like people who we can trust, turning around and saying, "Nah, it's all finished. Wagner's going back to their bases, and that's the end of it." So yeah, which I was happy for because, like, for a start, I don't want to see Russia have a civil war, which was what all these Ukrainian and NATO fanboys, that's what they wanted, was a big civil war in Russia. And the more people who were dead, the happier they would be because they're such good people, you know. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think, Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I don't. I mean, I look at it, I just think it probably wouldn't have gone to a civil war because I mean, it looked like, for example, you had the Communist Party as well as some of the nationalist battalions like Rusich who supported well the Wagner push, as it were. But then it was also you had all the top military generals like Surovikin who didn't support it. So, but then Wagner wasn't stopped by the Russian army. It was only really the air force with a few helicopters that tried their best to stop, as well as like
Yeah, but it
and
was hard. It was hardly anything, Mitch. Honestly, like if the Russian central government wanted to stop those troops going to Moscow, there would have been like constant air attacks and etc.
I mean,
They didn't do that at all.
I mean, we lost 2 helicopters in Ilyushin 25, so there are some losses on the Russian governmental side. But like in terms of like ground troops, none were lost because I mean, I don't know. I mean, perhaps perhaps the Russians kept all the forces over at Moscow because they must have some sort of operational reserve in case of something like this where there's a coup, and yeah, but like it just all I can say is like everyone was blindsided by this. Like no one expected Wagner to go rogue because I mean we knew Wagner had gobbed off for ages about the MLD screwing them over, but we never thought that they was going to open rebellion against the same MLD that made sure they had ammunition to fight in Bakhmut, for example. And it looks like now the deal that's been struck is like it's a case of that the MLD gets a shake up, which to be honest really needs shaking up anyway, because well, like Shoigu is like a diversity hire, practically stupid. Like it's pretty incompetent. Whereas if he gets a place where someone like Surovikin, then yeah, the wheels will grind a lot swiftly, and the war will go a lot better for Russia. So there's that side of it. But then there's also that sense of like because every NAFO tide was aiming for some sort of cathartic release where Russia goes into a civil war, and by the end of it, it's all just crushed because, of course, my favorite mustache man just cooked them all by diplomacy.
I just can't understand, Mitch, how like in the middle of a war. And I understand that the Wagner leader has no military rank whatsoever. He's like the leader of the company or whatever. The company, as in the company PLC. I do not understand how the leader of that sort of thing in the middle of a war does what he just did. Like, if he was a British dude in the middle of a British war, I would totally support shooting him, like executing out of him.
Yeah, the thing about so for one, he's connected to Putin, and Putin kind of has this social contract where he won't kill anyone who's ever been friends with him. So, for example, if you're an FSB or you were close to him, he won't kill you unless you do something like this. But even then,
I thought Putin was Pula.
No, it's like
I'm joking.
It's like they'll talk about like Vladimir Putin and all this, and go, okay, but another thing ironic is the thing is, let's say Prigozhin was successful in all this. I don't think, and all these NAFO talks for he would negotiate a peace. He wouldn't have negotiated peace. I mean, the guy is more hardline. Like this is a thing. Like they want a lot of these West stories want Vladimir Putin gone, but then they don't realize that he's a most moderate Russian leader you've got. If you get rid of him, you're just going to get someone who's a lot more anti-Western, who's a lot more bellicose, and will just rev up the economy to just destroy Ukraine.
I just hope that Putin will use this to replace the less efficient senior officers in the Russian army and actually fight this war properly and beat Ukraine quick. I really would like to see that.
This is something that's actually that's always irritated me about the Western diplomatic approach to Russia. Is obviously I'm against our own Western leaders. However, from their perspective, they've got it quite easy with someone like Putin because he is actually quite liberal, quite open to sort of global actions, as it were. He kind of seems like the ultimate ally in the East, but they, as usual, their narcissism beats them, and they can't have have this guy around who's not just completely one of theirs, top to bottom. They can't
100%.
Compromise on anything. But
Well,
one
I
of the
mean,
things I don't really get is that
could I just say, Adam, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. Putin recently said that all pedophiles in Russia will be chemically castrated, and the worst guys, the guys involved in the worst cases, will be executed. Now, who in the West doesn't agree with that? Who is a sane man or woman?
Well, you say that, but Harriet Harman, who's the current Labour MP, was literally a legal aid to a paedophile charity, so
100%.
a paedophile advocacy group.
100%. Another reason not to vote Labour in the next British general election.
Yeah. But I mean, one of the things that got me was, and I'm going to kind of slightly play devil's advocate, although I am just generally curious. Is this not also kind of? I mean, surely this is something Putin can't just shrug off, because this is quite a narrative. Well, in some ways, it's a narrative success for them, but it's also a bit of a narrative blow, because as soon as you see strife within an enemy bloc and it doesn't appear that they're as unionized as you previously thought, that's quite a narrative, a loss of prestige for them, and seemingly the West plays up to this all the time, because all the time they've been trying to really pretend as if there is this huge amount of strife within the Russian establishment.
Mitch?
I mean, it's sort of like the whole Wagner dispute, which looks to have been resolved. I mean, there's not really anything. I mean, Russian politics is fairly stable. The economy is doing pretty well, despite being the most heavily sanctioned in the world. And yeah, I mean, Putin. I mean, the thing is, I won't be surprised if Putin ends up retiring in like the next 5 or 10 years' time, just because the stresses of a war will take a toll, and also he's an old man anyway. He's like 70, I believe. So he's got to be retired at some point. And like Russian tradition is that it's someone who's not as well known who takes the helm. So it won't be someone like Medvedev or Prigozhin. It'll be someone who's not as well known to us.
Yeah.
It's like, for example, you take when Stalin died, it was Khrushchev who took over, not Beria or Zhukov or any of the other high profile. Or when Khrushchev gets removed, it's Brezhnev, who wasn't particularly well known compared to I can't think of the other actors, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, Khrushchev was a real left of field. Like very, very few people in the public had heard of that guy when he just sort of strolled into power. But yeah,
I think it's a
one.
bit different in modern Russia, but I still think whoever takes over from Putin probably not going to be one of the mostly pretty old guys that you can obviously see.
Wasn't there that sort of like Asiatic looking general that Putin was like kind of had in as his shoe-in for a replacement?
I'm not
trying to remember his poxy name.
Mitch might know. I don't know.
I mean, if you're on about Shoigu, who's like half, I'm pretty sure he's like half Tuvan and half Russian. But like the thing about him is, after this war, his prestige is completely gone. Like because he's badly handled things, and most of the Russian army hate him. So there's no way.
I think Shoigu is pretty much gone, isn't he, Mitch?
I mean, he's got to be. I mean, he's got. So all the military bloggers of Telegram who met with Putin like a couple of weeks back, they all pretty much said, look, Shoigu is one of the main reasons why this war isn't being as won as quick as we'd like it to be. And yeah, I'm saying like this is why we want Shoigu gone. And then you
Well,
got this
well,
mutiny. So at this point, if he still keeps Shoigu, then he's only got himself to blame when he actually does get removed by someone else sooner or
yeah,
later.
no. If Putin keeps Shoigu, I don't understand why he would do that. But all right.
It means it's Silovic, so it's part of that Silovic class, so that's why.
I don't know. Look, I've heard people saying Shoigu's been there since like almost when communism fell. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I would just say this: if Putin doesn't get rid of Shoigu, then he's an idiot. But I also think if he doesn't do another mobilization, he's a bit of an idiot as well. If he wants to win the damn war, do another mobilization, because one more and Ukraine's gone.
It looks like he's heading to that anyway, doesn't it?
I don't know. I hope it is. I hope he is, but I'm not sure. What do you think, Mitch?
I mean, it's like what? I'm accused in Moscow, the party declared martial law in the face of this. So it's like at this point, surely he knows the reaction of the Russian people by nature of a war, because it's like no one really opposes the war anymore, or those that do, they've all buggered off or abroad. All the liberals have gone, so you won't have any sort of colour revolution happening. Everyone that stay behind in Russia now, they're either apathetic or support it, whether lukewarm or strongly. Either way, they're not gonna do a colour revolution if Putin announces another draft, or he revs up the economy even further, or just generally just escalates a war. Which, to be fair, I think that's one thing is because you got this Ukrainian offensive, which even amidst all the disarray in Moscow,
Which
they
is
lost.
Failing.
Yeah, they lost a lot more Leopards and Bradleys today. So even
God.
amidst all the disarray, they still lost a load of armor. Now, after this offensive is done, Ukraine's going to have battered morale. The next NATO summit, Ukraine's not been invited to, which is generally a bad sign. And, a lot of the material has been spent. So you can imagine it'll be ripe for some sort of Russian counterattack. And they've got to be doing something with those reserves that they've got back in winter when they announce a first draft. So
I suppose that's why it's also important to try and put this whole fiasco to bed as quick as possible.
Which they have, to be fair. I mean,
Yeah.
It's like 24 hours and it's finished as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
Who's got nice dogs in the background?
That must be on Mitch's end.
Mitch, you got nice dogs in the background. Always like to hear dogs.
So he's just said BRB. But what is the actual state of the front at the moment? Because that hasn't been on the news much, and I'll be honest, I don't usually pursue news on it.
Well, I'm following Mitch on our Discord Ukraine War channel. The best the Ukrainians have managed is about 1.5 kilometers, which is like, but this is from like beyond the first outpost zone, and they're heading towards the first Russian line. And generally speaking, there are like 3 Russian lines they have to break. So they haven't done anything. Basically, it's like they get loads of Ukrainians are getting killed, but they're not getting anywhere close to breaking through the Russian lines at all, as far as I can work out. Anyway. But I'm sure when Mitch comes back, he can give us some more information. But yeah, I just think they're wasting their time, really. I mean, they don't have a huge manpower advantage. In fact, they don't have any real manpower advantage over Russia. They certainly don't have a tank or armored fighting vehicle advantage over Russia, not at all. They have almost no air force whatsoever in Ukraine that's still surviving, and they have far less artillery. So how anyone thinks that Ukraine is going to win this offensive that they're doing, and how any honest Western soldier could say they were going to win this offensive that they're doing is totally beyond me, to be honest. It's just totally beyond me. They're absolutely lying, or they're morons, and most Western military analysts aren't morons, so they're lying, really, is what's going on. I mean, I don't take any notice of like the Biased Brainwashing Corporation or any of the mainstream media. I mean, those guys are just propaganda. But like when you hear the British Ministry of Defence and the American defense dudes and what have you coming out with shit like this, you just got to think they're lying, because they are. You aren't going to win a defensive against a well-dug-in enemy who has more men than you, who has far more artillery than you, who has at least air superiority, who has look, there isn't any advantage the Ukrainians can use. There's nothing. They're just going to lose. And I don't understand anyone who doesn't realize this, to be honest. I mean, this is why all the Ukrainian NATO fanboys went so wild about this Wagner mutiny, is because they thought that was the way Ukraine could win. And presumably what they still call the West, which, like, to me is not the West at all. Because, like, you know, I don't want Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak to win at all. But that's just me, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that I was informed by someone else that that the US establishment has basically stepped down its initial what it now claims was its victory conditions in Russia significantly. You know, I think at one point they were basically saying they were going to reject the Russians from all what they considered Ukrainian territories, and now they've basically said that they won't see all of Ukraine broken up, which is quite a heavy step down, from what I can tell. You know, that's. I mean, even I was still unsure one way or the other, because I thought, you know, admittedly it's taken a long time. I know people are like, oh, it's a big place, blah blah blah.
Well,
you know,
it's bigger than Texas in America.
Yes,
so,
but there have been wars fought in that region that have gone far quicker than this, with much more rudimentary technology. So I was still a bit on the fence about how it would go. The thing is, I mean, this is something I've asked on this stream before, and I'm still not entirely sure any of us really have an answer to it. But what is the state of like Russian manufacturing? Because it, like, they don't seem to have that much of a problem with logistics beyond what you would normally have. They don't seem to be suffering with any sort of acute shortages or any backlogs beyond the norm. And it's like, how are they successfully managing to keep on top of this? You know, it's
well, they seem to be manufacturing plenty of ammunition. They seem to be manufacturing plenty of tanks, armored fighting vehicles, etc. I mean, certainly compared to a country like Britain, which supposedly is going to build a whole, what is it? We are saying something like 200 Challenger 3s, which, you know, if we were fighting a war like Ukraine is, all those tanks would be dead in about 6 weeks. So, you know, I don't know. What do I know? Almost no. Except that Russia seems to be doing all right on that stuff, and Ukraine is not, even with the backing of the whole West.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, it's still not like we shouldn't be screaming to the rooftops about this stuff, because ultimately this is still, you know, this is a regional power trying to claim a relatively small territory for itself, and even then, it's not a cakewalk for them. So, this isn't like a sign of the end for the American empire, but it is a first tentative step, you could say.
Well, I think it's a bit stronger than that, to be honest with you. Look, the West sent, what was it, 60 German Leopard 2s? None of them the most modern version, none of them with the most modern armoured packages. Britain sent somewhere between 14 and 28 Challenger 2s. Also, none of them with the most modern, up-to-date armour packages, because we don't want the Russians to capture them. The Americans said they were going to send Abrams, but haven't so far. But even when they get there, again, they won't have the most modern armored packages. But even so, it doesn't matter. Even if all those tanks had the most modern armored packages and had really skilled crews who'd been working on those tanks for, say, 18 months or more, which was not the case with the Ukrainians, there were not enough of them to break through the Russian armored positions. And any Western soldier who said they would was lying. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, in the case of like Russian manufacturing, I mean, in terms of tanks, armored vehicles, and ammunition, we seem to be doing fairly all right. Because I mean, you have Vagonzavod, who are based in like Western Serbia. I think Sverdlovsk is a city where they produce the tanks. In terms of artillery shells, they're scaling up production. I mean, compared to America, they dwarf which America produces in a month. So there's that. I heard though that because back at the height of summer, it was like 60,000 a day. Then I had to shrink it down to 20,000 a day because production was taking a bit of time to catch up to wartime demand. I imagine it's caught up by now, or the gap has significantly shortened on that side of things. But like on the electronics thing front, I mean the Chinese are, because I mean it's kind of like a situation where Russia sends oil and gas, and in exchange China gives them electronic chips for their helicopters, tanks, and so on.
All those Russian chips are just taken out of washing machines and fridges. This is what the Western MSM tells us.
Yeah, they also don't forget Wagner took back more with only shovels to use.
Yeah. They had no.
I mean, of course,
they only had one rifle per 10 men. Everyone else only had a shovel.
Yeah, and I've seen people unironically repeat this as well on places like Facebook.
It's so funny. It's so.
But the washing machine thing is particularly egregious because, like, anyone who's mildly autistic on planes, which I'm not, but I know enough people who are. The A10 Warthog main gun is made by a company who makes tumble dryers and washing machines. The instructions manual for it is the same mass-produced instructions manual for all their tumble dryers and washing machines.
No great surprise, really. No. But
just
also,
with a few changed out pages.
Let's also remember that the A10 Warthog in Iraq was not allowed to operate below about 20,000 feet because it might have got shot down. But, and he wasn't able to use that cannon at that range because, so like everything else, it's like, civilians think this, but not really true. They couldn't use that gun because you can't use that gun for 20,000 feet, surprisingly enough, because it's a 30mm autocannon. Whatever. It's just like there's so much nonsense that is talked about all of this stuff. Tomb of Arminius says Ukraine is a democracy just like us. More weapons to the fearless freedom fighters. And I presume and hope that Tomb of Arminius is taking the piss in the same way that I or most of the other people on this stream would. Because, yeah, democracy just like us.
Yeah, although another thing people should keep in mind is you should probably never volunteer to go and fight and die for a country that doesn't trust you to hold those same weapons at home as a civilian.
Yep. I mean, look, my own opinion at the moment is if Britain wants you to go to war, unless it's for other British people, somewhere like the Falkland Islands or something, I'd say, no way, boys. I'm not doing it.
What about with Australia against China? Let's say if China's trying to exert more strategic control over the region that will hem in Australia.
Would be all right. Yeah, all right. I'd probably support that.
Yeah,
I'd
possibly.
probably support that.
I'd still prefer it to be under a based Anglo-centric regime, though, rather than this bunch of
100%. I'm absolutely 100%. But yeah, but if this is a case of Britain sending the Royal Navy, to go and help Australia, yeah, I'd support that. I think, given that Australia supported Britain in like the Anglo-Boer War, the First World War, and the Second World War, so that would be kind of paying them back. So yeah, that would be my view on
that. Yeah, and I mean, I suppose for Ukraine, I mean, the only other thing aside from like the offensive failing and this coup kind of petering out is because you got Kharkov Oblast, where the Russians have just like doing the bite and hold tactics that we did in World War One, and that looks set to be doing well. But they've, like, I don't know if it's a full-fledged offensive, but it looks like we're just like doing. I don't know what I mean. 100 days offensive, I suppose, where bite and hold tactics, but I can't remember what battles.
No, 100 days defensive, Mitch, was different. That was like load of armor, really raw, well-trained troops, and the Germans' morale was not very good. I don't think this is what is happening in Ukraine at the moment. So far as I can see, and like I try and keep a overview on what's going on in that war. Ukraine's everyone calls it a counter-offensive, which of course is bullshit. It's just an offensive. Ukraine's offensive seems to be going really, really badly at the moment. One reason why I was absolutely shocked when the Wagner leader decided he was going to try and fuck up Russia by doing what he just did. But no, I mean, you know more about it than I do because you speak Russian, so you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in terms of like the whole deal that's gone on. I mean, apparently Prigozhin has been exiled to Belarus, so he can't go back to Russia. The Wagner fighters all took part in it. They've all been given immunity from prosecution for it. But I imagine they're going to get
because they're just soldiers, so fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to the Communist Party, for example, who supported it, because they supported coupping Putin, no less. Which, you know, I don't know if the communists will get purged. Because I mean, to be fair, the Communist Party, I mean, they're not as popular as it used to be back in the 90s. It's like 5% of the vote, and even it was mainly just boomers, you know, in Russia just vote the Communist Party. But like, yeah, everyone else in the Duma supported Putin. So I don't know what's happening there. I don't know if it's going to be something like, because you had Turkey back in 2016, we had that coup which failed, and so you just had like this massive purge in both the army and the politics.
I always thought that Turkey coup was very, very suspicious, to be honest. It was so weak. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was I mean, all I knew of it was that it was a very pro-Western coup. I mean, the Kemalist in the army, because you have Erdogan, who's more Islamic, but that's the thing. Like Turkish tradition is that they want Kemalism, as in like secular democracy and all this. And Erdogan goes against that tradition, so it was like the army was split down the middle. but then he kind of won, and so it's pretty much Turkey is just like this Islamic third world anti-European country that just wants to flood us with immigrants, basically.
Like I said, I'm dubious about that coup. I'm even more dubious about that coup than Wagner's mutiny, and it was more a mutiny than a coup. But you know, all the Ukrainian and NATO fanboys got hugely excited on Twitter. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe Russia will do another mobilization, which I think they should, and just crush the Ukrainians reasonably quickly, which I think would be quite a good idea. But that's just me, you know. And like I absolutely regard senile Joe Biden and Indian banker Sunak as enemies of the real British Anglo-Celtic people. They're just our enemies. I don't think Putin is, to be honest. Certainly not at the moment.
Although, on that note, I am going to have to head off. So,
yeah, no, look, we're pretty much finished anyway.
Yeah.
Did you have any final thoughts or anything you would like to plug?
No, nothing to cover on this subject, and nothing to plug. Actually, maybe shortly in the future, we'll see.
All right. Look, I very much hope, Adam, we will have you back next week.
Yep.
You've been missed, not least by me, because yeah, you and I have been doing this channel for a long time. So yeah, I hope you'll come back next week.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us this week.
Yeah, no worries. See you later. Good night.
Go well. Mitch, any final thoughts or anything you would like to plug?
I mean, I've said in my Discord. I mean, I don't know how to do a YouTube stream, but like, because I mean, in terms of like, because I've been studying my old English, I might just flop the idea of doing a stream, just talking about it.
Yeah,
like,
look, you mentioned this, Mitch, in the Discord. Look, if you want to do a stream on that, look, I would be totally useless on this. I know nothing about languages or lingo, but I'll happily host it on my stream if you want to do it. But don't expect me to have anything useful to put into it. But yeah, if you want to do an old English stream, let me know and I'll put it on my stream if you want.
Yeah, I've thought the idea of it. I mean, I'm halfway through the book, so it's probably good. I mean, I started it back on Monday. I'm halfway through, so I'll probably be like the week after next. But I'd be up for it to like fully just get, because I mean, I've just been doing loads of notes, really.
Well, no, like I said, mate, if you want to do an old English stream, like I said, I'll be totally useless on it. I know nothing about languages, and I'm not very good at them. But yeah, I'll happily host one from you. Anything you wanted to plug apart from
that? Unless people want to follow my Twitter, which is Anglo Gopnik.
There you go.
From that now.
There you go. All right, guys. I got something I want to plug. On Friday, 30th of June. That's Australian time. At 7 p.m. Eastern Australian time. That's Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane time. I'm going to be doing a stream on the Voice. This is this referendum that's coming up in Australia, and it's on the Aboriginal voice, and it's to try and make something absolutely embedded in Australian politics that supports Aboriginal people. One of its main supporters is a communist dude, and he absolutely is a communist dude, and even says he is. And this should be a really good stream because I've got some good guests for this stream. Chris Gard is going to be a guest. The Franklin is going to be a guest. Furious Pernax is going to be a guest, and also Lady Charlotte is, last but not least, also going to be a guest. So on Friday, 30th of June, 7 p.m. Eastern Australian time, please come and check out that stream, because we're going to be talking about this nonsense of the voice and how it's going to be used to destroy the real Australia, basically. So do come and check us out for that. I'll just have a quick check in case we got any donations, which we did not, I note, as far as I can see anyway. So, okay, we didn't get any. And on that point, I'm going to play us out with a tune. Okay, that was Thomas Arndt's The Mask of Alfred, i.e. Alfred the Great, which I think is a nice tune. Thank you very much to my guests this evening, Ataman and Mitch, and also do come and look at our stream on the Australian Aboriginal Voice on Friday, 30th of June. And other than that, we'll see you next week. Go well, guys, and take care.